The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Welcome from the General Assembly in the City of Richmond. I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports in the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association. And a very warm welcome to our special guest, Delegate Mark Cole, representing the 88th District.
Well, thank you for having me, Woody. I always enjoy being here with you.
Thank you for being here. I know it's very busy. We've got a few weeks left in this very short session, 2013. How are things going on in your district in terms of the economy?
Better than average. I mean, it's not as good as it was, before the economic recession and the crash, but still we're doing better than most of the state, and of course the state is doing better than most of the nation. Though, I mean, there's still employment's not where it needs to be, and the economy's not growing like it should be. So there's still concerns out there.
And of course, job creation is critical in order to continue the economic situation in the Commonwealth and in your district.
Well, that's correct, and our tax revenue, the amount of money that the state has to spend on critical things like transportation, education, and of course public safety, all that depends on how the economy's going, because the state gets most of its revenue from income taxes, both personal and corporate income taxes, sales taxes, and so when the economy's slow, people and businesses aren't making as much money as they were. They're not buying as many things, so sales taxes are down, and that just makes the budget very tight.
And of course, what are the biggest economic drivers in your district?
Well, a lot of it is Washington. We're kind of on the outer edges of the D.C. suburbs, so we have a lot of commuters that commute to Northern Virginia and D.C. They either work with the federal government or for contractors, so a lot of it is driven by the federal government.
And of course, we're concerned about this sequestration, which may yet occur in Washington, and that's going to have a significant impact not only on federal employees, but because the Commonwealth has a wealth of military installations, that's going to have an impact.
Yeah, it is going to have an impact, and I think everybody realizes that the federal budget is going to have to be cut. You can't keep spending trillion-dollar deficits and not have an impact. So the federal budget is going to have to be cut, but nobody thinks that just automatic across-the-board cuts is a good idea. So I'm hopeful that Washington will get their act together and start making kind of logical, reasonable cuts to try to bring the deficits down and balance the budget. In Richmond, every year we have to keep our budget in balance. It can be done. It's just right now Washington spending is out of control, and they really need a balanced budget amendment to force them to balance the budget like we have to here every year.
And our state constitution requires a balanced budget.
I'd like to think that the politicians in Richmond are different than the politicians in Washington are, but it's probably not the case. The reason that we balance our budget every year is because the Virginia Constitution requires us to, and I think we need to do the same thing in Washington.
And that also helps us maintain the AAA rating that the
right.
Commonwealth continues to enjoy.
And see, because of the discord in Washington, if you will, that's put Virginia on the watch list for our AAA bond rating, because so much of Virginia's economy is dependent on federal spending. You have Northern Virginia dependent on the Washington, D.C. area, but also down in Hampton Roads you have a lot of the military spending and things like that, and it's nothing that we're doing, but the ratings agency says, look, you guys are so dependent on Washington and their spending that we're going to put you all on the watch list for your bond rating. It's nothing you're doing, but you know, we just kind of see the writing on the wall with the way things are going in the national capital.
And of course, this is why the governor has proposed increasing the federal contingency fund and also the rainy day fund.
That's right. You know, a couple of years ago, in response to this, Governor McDonald set aside a fund to try to cushion the impact on the state budget of the federal budget cuts when they come. So we're trying to do what we can to prepare for it, but there's not a lot we can do if Washington doesn't get their act together.
Now, of course, transportation, as usual, is probably the biggest issue pending before the General Assembly this year, and the governor has a proposal that's being debated now and will continue to be debated until the end of the session. Talk to us about the reaction amongst your colleagues and your constituents about the governor's proposal.
Well, the governor, you know, came out with his proposal right as we were going into session. And it's a bold proposal. I'll certainly give him credit for that. You know, a lot of controversy with it too, because one of the key pieces of it is to do away with the gas tax, but then increase the sales tax and dedicate the increase to transportation. Currently, about a half cent of the sales tax is dedicated to transportation, and he would increase the sales tax to offset the loss of the gas tax and dedicate that to transportation. The problem with the gas tax is that it's kind of a static source of revenue and actually declining in some areas. It's on a cents per gallon basis, so it doesn't change with inflation or anything like that. Plus, cars are getting much better gas mileage today than they used to, and the federal standards are set to go up in the future, so the gas tax will continue to be a declining revenue source, and so the governor's trying to replace that with an increase in the sales tax, which will kind of grow with the economy in the future rather than being static. You know, and certainly, I mean, there's things in the governor's plan that I think merit consideration, and we've got to do something to get more funding into transportation. But again, I'm not real sure that getting rid of the gas tax is a great idea, because that is pretty much a user fee. The people that drive the roads are the ones that pay it. But we'll see how it goes. The governor's plan is proceeding through the legislature at this time, and I'm sure there'll be some horse trading along the way, if you will, and some changes will be made to the governor's plan, and we'll see what comes out near the end.
And of course, the diesel fuel tax, which applies primarily to trucking, would remain. It does apply to some individuals at this point now, and I know there's some discussion about that issue.
Yeah, and that's kind of got the trucking industry upset in that the regular gas tax would go away, but the diesel gas tax would not. So again, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if at the end the excuse me, the governor's plan doesn't have some changes made to it before everything's said and done.
And there are additional revenue raisers in there as well. I think there's an additional $15 a year registration fee and a $100 annual fee on those who use vehicles like hybrids. And again, that's to try to recoup the fact that hybrids and electric cars are starting to come online. They don't pay the gas tax or as much as a normal driver would. So, you know, the governor's trying to, you know, get some revenue from them to help maintain and the roads. And though some people say what you're doing is you're discouraging people from driving more economical and clean-fueled cars. So, like I said, you know, there are concerns about the governor's plan, and we'll see what comes out at the end. One of those other elements that is a moving part relates to reliance upon the federal government to pass a law to allow retail online internet sales.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Anytime you're relying on Washington to do something, but right now, Virginia already has a sales tax on internet sales, but kind of a voluntary tax.
So in other words, whenever I buy something online, I'm supposed to declare that at the end of the year when I pay my income tax?
That's right. There's a place on your Virginia income taxes where you're supposed to declare how much you've purchased from out-of-state vendors, either through the internet or mail order, kind of the old Sears catalog type thing. And then you're supposed to pay sales taxes on that at the end of the year when you file your income tax. Of course, most people don't realize that. They don't keep track of their internet sales, so the actual collection rate on that is very low, and it would take an act of Congress for states to be able to kind of mandate that out-of-state vendors collect sales tax on internet purchases, and that's part of the governor's plan. Is he's expecting Congress, because there is a bill in Congress to do that, and he's depending on that as a source of revenue for the transportation plan, and I'm not sure that that's a good idea to do that.
It would make those online sale retailers like Amazon that recently located and has a site here in the state now.
Yeah. Well, the Amazon, they're a little bit different, because once you have a site in the state, then you're supposed to collect Virginia sales tax for Virginia sales. So they'll be doing that later this year, regardless of whether the federal government acts or not. But other vendors that don't have a presence in Virginia, they're currently not required to collect the sales tax. And of course, you got the kind of the Main Street vendors, the people in the traditional bricks and mortar stores and stuff that say, hey, that gives them an unfair competitive advantage because we have to charge our people sales tax and they don't. So there's always been kind of a push-pull between those, the traditional stores and the internet retailers, because the internet retailers have not had to collect the sales tax.
Back to transportation in general, however, it's not that the General Assembly has failed to recognize the need to generate additional revenues, because a few years ago the state was able to borrow in order to engage in new construction. That was because of the AAA bond rating and the fact that construction costs were lower.
Yeah, well, that's true. Governor McDonald, when he came into office, he began issuing a lot of the bonds that the General Assembly had previously authorized for transportation projects. So we do have a lot of transportation projects underway. The problem is that it takes so long to make road improvements anymore. You could double VDOT's budget tomorrow and you probably wouldn't see any impact for the next 5 to 10 years. We've just kind of gotten behind on that, and we're constantly playing catch up with transportation.
The governor also has some significant initiatives regarding education, especially K through 12. Talk to us about some of those.
Yeah, he's trying to reform the teacher evaluation system, and also we don't have, quote, tenure in Virginia, but they do have what they call continuing contracts, which is kind of the equivalent of tenure for teachers, and are trying to reform that process and the teacher evaluation process, and try to make it more like the private sector, where good teachers will be rewarded, and teachers who are not performing well will not be, and could be fired or terminated if they're not performing up to speed. So that's another thing that the governor's been pushing through. Also, he's trying to reform the charter school law. Right now, charter schools are local. It's up to this local school board if they want to form a charter school or not, and as a consequence, only 4 charter schools have been formed and are operating in Virginia. And the governor thinks that that's a underutilized resource, so there's talk of reforming that in order to try to encourage more charter schools, especially in school districts where they're having problems passing and getting accredited. good with the standards of learning. And another is virtual schools. That was another initiative that Governor McDonnell initiated when he came into office, and that's kind of like online schools, and something that we're trying to encourage. And so a couple of these virtual school systems have stood up and are operating in Virginia now.
And also Teach for America, he wants to bring new students into the state as well.
Teach for America is a kind of a teacher training program, and it's had really good success in other states as far as bringing in good teachers and so forth, and that's something that the governor is also pushing this year.
And the other perennial is the ability of a local school district to start the school year before Labor Day.
Yeah, and see, that's always kind of a give and take there. Under current law, about half of the localities, mainly in the western part of the state, have the authority to start school before Labor Day.
That's because of weather-related closures.
That's right. They have worse weather during the winter, and so they may have more closures and that so forth. But the tourism industry, which is very important to Virginia's economy, are very concerned about just having a blanket policy throughout the state of allowing schools to start before Labor Day. They say that that's going to have a negative impact on their industry, which could then, of course, impact the tax revenues to the state, which would impact the amount of money available to the schools. So that's something that's always a concern. It's kind of a good policy in general. Say, hey, local school boards should be able to set their own calendar. However, if it's going to have a negative impact on the state economy and the money available for education, then maybe it's not such a good idea.
We just had the Super Bowl yesterday. Tim Tebow was not in it, but Tim Tebow's name is still the byword here in the General Assembly again.
They have what they call the Tebow bill, which we've had several years now. And what that would do is it just provides a local option for local school boards, if they so desire, to allow homeschool kids to participate in school sports, not just sports, but extracurricular activities. The argument is that the parents of homeschoolers are paying taxes to support the schools, so why can't they use some of the services? And of course, then the converse is that, hey, these are supposed to be school teams and school activities, so if you're not enrolled in the school, how can you participate? So what we've decided to do, the House anyways, has passed legislation that would leave that decision up to the local school board. Some of these, especially smaller school districts, may actually want some homeschool kids to play on their teams, kind of fill out their teams. So again, that bill has passed the House, but it's gone over to the Senate for their consideration.
And of course, the administration wants parents to be able to easily determine how their schools are doing. He wants, an A through F grade for schools now as well.
Excuse me, I'm fighting a cold. That's correct. That's correct.
Sorry, take your time.
He's trying to, excuse me. He's trying to institute a grading scale, A through F, for our schools, similar to what parents would see on report cards, to give the parents kind of a report card on the schools to see how they're doing. So
because now, as I understand it, there is something parents can look to, but it's vague and it's not easily understandable.
That's correct. It is vague, and it's kind of like progressing, or meeting standards, or advancing, that type of thing, where parents are used to seeing A through F for their students, and they'd be able to fully get a better idea where their school is standing.
Right, and I know something that you're particularly interested in this year as a result of the Sandy Hook tragedies relates to school safety.
That's correct. I put in a couple of bills this year dealing with school safety. One was to put a school resource officer, which is a deputy or police officer specially trained, into each school. Excuse me. That's been sent to the governor's task force for to look at school security. So they're currently considering that. Another thing that I put in was a bill to allow schools to hire certified and trained security guards, armed security guards. That is going forward for private schools and private daycares. Currently, they don't even have the authority to do that, which I don't think is the state shouldn't be telling private schools that they can't hire security guards, so that is moving forward now.
Great. Now, you chair one of the more important standing committees in the General Assembly. As I understand it, Privileges and Elections happens to be the oldest standing committee in the General Assembly, and I know there's legislation that has emanated from your committee that you have pursued this year as well as in previous years. Can you give us an idea of what that legislation is and its objective?
Yeah, we've last year we adopted for the first time a voter ID law in Virginia that required voters to show some form of ID before they go and vote, and that included things like paychecks and utility bills and bank statements. During the campaign, a kind of an undercover video surfaced on the internet of a campaign staffer discussing ways to commit voter fraud using those type of items. And so I have legislation to kind of pare down the list a little bit to remove things like utility bills and bank statements and paychecks from the list of acceptable ID. It's not a major overhaul of it, but it does pare down the list a little bit, and I think it's a reasonable compromise, if you will, because I don't know anywhere else that will accept things like that as a form of ID. Also, we've got legislation this year to reduce the number of petition signatures required to get on the statewide ballot. We had a controversy last year with the Republican presidential primary where most of the Republican candidates did not even qualify to get on the ballot this past year because they couldn't collect enough signatures.
I think there was a requirement of 10,000 signatures.
10,000 signatures and then 400 in each congressional district. And what we're doing is the legislation that's moving forward right now would cut that in half in order to allow more candidates ballot access and give the voters more choices.
There was a lawsuit involving that requirement, was there not?
Yeah, there was complaints after the fact that some of the candidates said Virginia's ballot access bar was set too high, and that was actually discriminatory against some candidates. However, the judge threw that out, saying, look, you guys didn't complain before, you only complained after the fact, so you knew the rules. If you had issue with them, you should have complained before. And so that lawsuit didn't go anywhere, but we're still trying to address the issue by reducing the number of signatures required.
From 10,000 to what, 5,000, I think?
From 10,000 to 5,000, and then each congressional district reduce it from 400 to 200.
Now, have those bills passed the House and are now over on the Senate side?
They're still being considered by the House. They should be passed out of the House this week.
That's because tomorrow's crossover
Tomorrow's
day.
crossover. Of course, by the time your people are seeing this TV program, that'll be passed. But yeah, it's a very busy week here this week with crossover.
Now, another major decision pending before the General Assembly relates to the fact that the United States Supreme Court upheld the Affordable Care Act last year, but in doing so, it basically said that the federal government could not penalize states if they did not want to accept Medicaid funds. So the state has a decision to make now as to whether to expand Medicaid coverage in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, right now, the federal government is offering funds to states that will expand their Medicaid coverage to include more people. The concern is that in the long run, that federal money will not be there. And Medicaid has been one of the fastest growing areas in the budget and is in serious need of reform. So right now the governor has decided not to expand Medicaid because of the concerns that that cost within just a few years is going to be shifted to the state, and it'll actually end up being a significant burden on the taxpayers of Virginia if we were to expand it.
And I understand the administration is in talks with the federal government in terms of potential waivers in order to protect against the situation where the federal government may not fulfill its commitment.
Yeah, that's correct. The governor has been talking to the administration for probably several months now, trying to figure out, exactly what kind of waivers we might be able to get to try to make the system more affordable. But those talks are still ongoing. And
there's also another decision which apparently has been made, and that is to allow the federal government to create and run, at least initially, these healthcare exchanges.
That's right. The Affordable Health Care Law requires that exchanges, healthcare exchanges, be set up. The state can either do it, and if the state opts not to, the federal government is supposed to set up the exchanges themselves for the people in that state. Again, the governor looked at this and was trying to figure out, would it be more advantageous? Would we be able to minimize the negative impact on business and on people in Virginia if we set up our own exchanges and ran them? And there really was no advantage to Virginia to set up take on the cost of setting up these exchanges and running them themselves. So as of right now, the governor has opted to tell the federal government, if you want exchanges in Virginia, you need to go ahead and set them up and run them.
Now, these exchanges would act as a marketplace, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, it's supposed to be kind of like a clearinghouse, if you will, for health insurance companies and people to try to get coverage. And right now, nobody's really sure how they're going to work, how they're going to be run and set up. So everybody's kind of in a wait-and-see mode to see, are these things really going to work? Are they going to help drive down the cost of health care?
So in theory, at least, I might be able to go to a website and view proposals from healthcare providers within the Commonwealth and make a selection from there?
I think that's kind of the theory behind it, or the thought behind it, is that you would have a centralized marketplace where you could try to shop and get the coverage that you need as an individual or for your family or for your business, for that matter.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, Delegate Marco. Good luck throughout the rest of the 45 days.
Well, thank you. And I'm sorry I've been fighting a cold this week. So
we understand.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.